Hello, bonjour, guten tag, holla, and welcome to Social Buzz Chat here on YouTube. I'm joined by Tim. Love is a roller coaster, you've just got to ride it. So, Tim, that's not Ronan Keating style, tell me what you do.
It's a mouthful, that, isn't it?
It is a bit of a mouthful.
Sorry.
Every Ronan Keating song is a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, welcome.
What do I do?
Yeah.
In life? I'm the social media manager for Pizza Express.
Ah, fantastic.
A lovely pizza restaurant in the UK for all your global crowd from all the hellos you just had to say.
That's the most seamless plug we've ever had on this show, even ahead of last week's cup plug. We've just done the chat, it was marvellous as always, and you brought up a conversation topic that could prove to be slightly controversial down the line. We were asking along the lines of, just social media in general, like people working in social media, do you feel like sometimes you can be a scapegoat, and do you feel pressured, for example, to always be hitting certain targets, and do you feel pressured that if something goes wrong, it's on your head? So before we get into that, we'll start this, as we always do, with asking one question. How did you get your start in social media? Like, tell me your yarn, tell me your origin story as if you were Batman.
So I'm not Batman, and whatever I say now is not going to be interesting because I'm not Batman. So thanks for that.
Really sorry, I am sorry, but I'm not.
Oh, well, I wish I was Batman, but I'm not. I started working at BBC, which was an amazing place to start my career, and actually that was in about 2006, and so Twitter and Facebook and social networking in general was like in its infancy really, and I remember a journalist saying their username, Twitter handle on screen was actually seen as a really bad thing, and I saw people get in trouble for it, Adam.
In 2006?
Yeah, seriously.
That is 10 years ago now.
And it's unthinkable now, given how much, especially like Twitter is a platform for journalism as much as anything else. So I worked in sport there and slowly got into social side of things as BBC obviously had a fairly large presence across all networks. Found myself writing articles for the website and then distributing them online on Twitter. We had a big presence. And then had a real urge as a sports fan and a big football fan to take that and work for a football club. And I was very lucky to get a job at Tottenham Hotspur, which is obviously a fairly large English team.
You a fan?
I'm not.
Okay.
I think I should keep my allegiances to myself.
Keep your allegiances to yourself
for fear
then.
of reprisals. But it was an incredibly interesting place to work. And as a social person, you can't ask for a more engaged audience, be it incredibly negative if you've lost a game or incredibly positive if you've won. But regardless, your content is of huge interest to people. So I was lucky, I'm very lucky in that everywhere I've worked has kind of had an audience that is really interested in what is being talked about in sport and now pizzas, because everyone loves pizza. Food obviously is incredibly popular as a visual thing across social media. Yeah. But I kind of fell into it. I guess I got into it at the right time, because back in the kind of mid to late 2000s, it was still a fairly new thing in terms of social media manager jobs and jobs created specifically for that kind of content creation. But certainly I persevered with thinking of ideas that I thought would work across different networks and would get people talking. But I definitely feel like I was fortunate with the timing, because you look now and the amount of people who want to do this kind of work has increased tenfold, and therefore the competition for these kind of jobs is massive.
Do you feel like you got a bit of a boost just with your ideas, to go with an idea and see how it went? Yeah,
definitely. And in terms of specifically the job that I got at Spurs, before I actually got the job, I came up with lots of content ideas and actually did them, filmed them and edited them. So then when I turned up to the interview and to meet the team there, I'd already put quite a lot of work in. And it was a great, actually that specific interview was really interesting learning experience, because some of those ideas fell flat and some were really liked, and I got the job. So
that brings us perfectly on to the question from today's chat, a question that you set earlier today. And it goes like this, excuse me whilst I go through a few tabs. question is this, and it's something that I've feared, I've suffered from, and sometimes had to drink like the proverbial Kool-Aid and just get on with it and just take whatever's being thrown at you. And the question is, have you ever feared a negative reaction to your content? And this caused quite a buzz chat on Twitter. And this guy, I branding 101. And we got some really interesting responses to this. And overall, people like, don't be scared of your ideas, go for it. Dan Izzard, who sent us a very fruity jumper that was covered in pineapples, sent us a very blunt and precise tweet, basically. He just like, be bold. And he gave us a prime example, which is a link to a website that he's made called pissoffback2.london. And what that is, to anyone who isn't aware, that's an example of like content marketing. And it's an idea that could go wrong, or it could go really well. There's loads of these that circulate the internet on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Ruth Davison from 72 Point got in touch, and she was like, constantly, but you just have to run with it and trust that you know your audience. And I'll ask your thoughts on it like in a few seconds. At Social Media Week in New York, one of the main topics going around was data versus gut. And it's something that's like a lot of agencies and a lot of individuals who don't know a lot about social media need to understand, like the combination and kind of like how data and a gut feeling should sit next to each other. It's something that we'll come along to in possibly a later episode. But tell me, like, what's your answer to that? Have you ever feared content you've put out, and what's the best way to, I don't know, just to address those fears of yourself and basically senior management?
Absolutely yes. And still now. I still always, especially when we do bigger pieces and bigger productions, especially with video, which we do a lot of, I always fear like a negative reaction and failure, because you put so much of yourself into something that is suddenly extremely public facing, and you just have people who you don't know and you've never heard from before suddenly critiquing what you've done. And there is something about that is incredibly scary, but at the same time it's really exhilarating. And that's why I think that I think we might be talking about it in a minute, but in terms of fearing like a negative response or no response at all, like I would rather get a negative response, because when you don't have anything back, it just means that no one really gives a shit about what you've done.
Yeah, let's bring it up now. Like, when you get a negative response, what's your 3-step plan? We spoke about crisis management in the episode previously, which we'll link to below now.
Whoa!
There it is.
Whoa!
There it is, right there. But what would your 3 tips be to responding to a negative idea for people watching this who may be putting out an idea for the first time and they're not sure how to respond?
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of the answers we got actually are what I will say here, which is if you fear that negative response, then you're already doing something right in the first place, because it means you're like hugely invested in what you're doing. Have a really thick skin about it, because everyone on social media has an opinion. And so you might create something that like internally like everyone's into, and you talk to people about it and they're like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then you put it out and 90% of people will completely agree with everyone you've previously spoken to, but 10% think, that's bollocks. Like, just don't worry about it. What's the worst that can happen? Like, to someone saying that you've done something that they think shite. It's different, I think, when a brand has content that goes out which people might find offensive. I remember there's a pizza brand called DiGiorno, who are actually really brilliant on Twitter, who hijacked a hashtag which they really probably shouldn't have hijacked.
Oh dear.
Yes.
There's one of your don'ts. Hijacking hashtags can be very detrimental to you and your brand.
Yeah, it really can. And it's so quick and easy to do. That, I mean, that's like not even like considered content. That's just something that they saw and thought, yeah, we can take advantage of that quickly. The hashtag that they hijacked was actually being talked about as part of a chat about domestic violence.
Oh.
Yeah. So and so you can imagine then what happened was that there were, that person was getting absolutely annihilated online, and to be fair, like, you can understand why there would be a lot of anger surrounding that kind of thing.
But
so
they can learn from it.
you can learn from it,
Yeah.
and I think that, and they actually, the way that they responded, I thought was very good. They tried to respond to everyone, were very apologetic, and you can see from their account now that they definitely have learned from that, and yet they haven't kind of diluted the way that they talk and how they were before, which was
Yeah.
really good. But they're just being a bit more careful.
Keep tone of voice. Always keep tone of voice. And like if you go with an idea, one of the worst things you can do, unless it gets like a severe threat level, is to apologise. Case in point was the House of Fraser emotional campaign. They never apologised. They just went with it regardless of the reaction it got. Okay, we asked you like what your final question we wanted to ask you. And it's quite interesting to people trying to get into social media. Like every social media role can be different. You can be working for a marketing company, you can be working for a publisher like The Drum, for example, you can be working for Pizza Express pushing food, and everyone loves pizza. According to BuzzFeed, their pizza posts do 7 times better than every other post they do. It's because pizza makes the internet, just so you know. So my final question to you is, how does working for a professional sports team, like you did at Spurs, differ to other social media roles? Like, explain how it was different.
Working for a sports team is absolutely incredible because, as I said earlier, the audience that you're working with cares so much about the people that you're making, creating content about. And so what you find is that you kind of, every single thing you do, you fear in some way what might happen because they're so emotional regarding everything you talk about. And the reaction that you get to your content can differ so much depending on what's happened on the pitch and to that team. And so we had a Halloween prank which did incredibly well with Kyle Walker and lots of the other players. But the night before that video went out, there was a football match, and had Spurs have lost that match, it's quite possible that we would not have put that video out because of how that would have been perceived by the fans. In that, why are the players pissing around like this when you're trying to win stuff? Like, what are you doing? Thankfully, they didn't miss. They won that match, and we were able to put it out. But the mood and the tone of what you put out is really shaped by how the team is doing.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty and I think it's pretty much, from what I can tell, like looking at other sports teams, it's pretty much the same across the board. But you're so dictated by results. And the level of engagement is dictated by results a lot of the time, and the tone of the engagement is dictated by the results. So you feel like a lot less in control than you kind of do when you're working like for a restaurant brand, like I am now. I think it's exciting, but equally like you're almost constantly on edge because you don't know whether or not what you're working on, when it goes out, how it's going to be perceived. So I think it's really unique in that respect. And also just the level of attention that sport teams get on social media is incredible. And then we were talking earlier about the social media manager for Houston Rockets who put out what I would consider a pretty playful tweet. His team were beating another one. He put out 2 emojis, one of which had was a horse head, the other of which was a gun, and said, "It'll be over soon." To the Dallas Mavericks, and he got in a lot of trouble for that and lost his job. And that's because he was doing it for a brand and a sports team that had incredible gravitas online. Like, what he does was being watched by a lot of people, and sports just make people more emotional, I think.
Sport is very emotional. I'm an Aston Villa fan, so I completely get that.
No.
So let's move on from that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Everybody just apologises when I tell them. It's so harsh.
It's going to be okay, man. It's going to be all right.
It's not going to be okay.
It's really not, actually.
It's not. We're gone. Thank you very much for joining. Would you like to say your Twitter handle down that camera?
It is. It's at Tim Love Pizza because someone else took Tim Loves Pizza, which would have been ideal, but no.
You know, you can't pluralise your name. You can't do it.
No, I know, but
grammatically
it just
correct,
would have worked
can
so
you?
well, Adam. It would have worked so well.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank
I'm Adam Libernati Roach. You can follow me on Bacon Chin. Follow me on Bacon Chin? You can follow me on Twitter at Bacon Chin. I've got this wrong so many times.
Bacon chin.
Bacon Chin.
How? Why?
You'll find out at some point. I'm going to get interviewed by one of our bosses on here
Wow.
at some point.
Bacon chin.
Bacon Chin. Think about it what you will.
Yeah, I am.
Think away and sip from your cup. We're collecting cups, by the way, so if you want to send us a cup with your brand on, we'll happily drink out of it and add it to our shelf behind us. If you have any questions about the show, get in touch. Chinma Pizza, Bacon Chin, Buzz Awards, or at The Drum. Remember to comment below on anything you find interesting in this, subscribe to The Drum channel, and we'll be back in a week's time with another episode of the Social Buzz Chat here on YouTube. So, cheers, my friend.
Thanks, Bacon chin.
Thanks, Tim.
It's a pleasure.
I think probably the most important thing is to make sure that you've got your crisis management responses in place beforehand.